When you sent over this document, The Appearances at Fatima in Orthodox Christianity, I gotta say, I was really intrigued. Fatima being such a cornerstone for Catholics. It kind of hit me that I had zero clue how the Orthodox Church viewed those apparitions.
It's a perspective that often slips under the radar, for sure, but fascinating, really. And this document, it jumps right in, lays out why these events, huge for Catholics, get a totally different reaction from the Orthodox side.
And it's more than just, like, here's how we interpret it differently, right? This document seems to be saying Fatima's pushing specific Catholic doctrines that the Orthodox just can't get behind.
Exactly. I mean, most people, Fatima, they think prophecy about Russia, right?
Yeah.
But this document, it's saying, hold on, look at the apparitions themselves, the messages. They're upholding teachings that have been a point of contention for ages.
Which is wild because suddenly it's not just about one country's destiny. It's about core beliefs, stuff that's been debated for centuries.
And get this, the document doesn't even start with the theology throwdown. It points out inconsistencies within the Fatima accounts themselves, right off the bat.
Oh, really? Now that's interesting. What do you mean? What about the Fatima accounts is important?
Well, so you have these different versions, right? Details change. People claim they saw or heard different things. It raises immediate questions about how reliable the whole thing is.
I see. Yeah, if the stories don't match up, it makes sense to wonder what really went down.
Right. And the document, it points out this one detail. The apparition calls herself Our Lady of the Rosary. Even if you just kind of know about Christianity, that phrase screams Catholicism. Like, boom, here come the theological differences front and center.
So it sounds like we're really going beyond just the events themselves with Fatima, huh? Like we're getting into some seriously deep theological waters here.
Absolutely. The document dives headfirst into these theological differences, focusing on specific Catholic doctrines woven into the Fatima narrative. Doctrines that, well, let's just say the Orthodox Church might raise an eyebrow at.
Okay, like what? Give us an example.
Okay, take the Immaculate Conception, right? The idea that Mary, she was conceived without sin. This is huge in Catholicism.
Yeah, for sure.
But the document argues this completely goes against what the Orthodox Church believes. We believe that every single person except Christ obviously is born with that original sin thing,
So it's not even just about Mary being conceived without sin. It's about how that belief impacts this whole bigger picture of sin and how we view it.
Exactly. And then there's the rosary. I mean, you can't talk about Fatima without the rosary.
Which is so interesting, though, because the rosary, it actually comes from the Orthodox prayer rope, doesn't it? But this document, it calls the rosary unacceptable for Orthodox believers. Like, that's pretty strong language. Why is such a hard line against something that seemingly shares a root?
It's a fantastic question, and it gets right to the core of how these two branches of Christianity see prayer and our whole relationship with God. So, yeah, both use beads, right? A tool.
Mm-hmm.
But what those beads mean, the prayers themselves, totally different. According to the document, that's what makes the rosary a no-go in Orthodoxy.
Makes sense, like two trees, same roots, but the fruit they grow is different. Speaking of different purgatory, I always thought that was more of a Catholic Protestant debate. But it sounds like the Orthodox view, that's its own thing altogether.
You're right, it is. And it goes beyond just believing in it or not. It's about what purgatory says, about how we get salvation, about God's grace, the whole thing.
So are you saying that in the Orthodox view, maybe there's less emphasis on having to earn God's grace through what we do?
You got it. The document really hits on this. Catholics see purgatory as this place, right? You got to be purified after death, suffering, prayers, all that. But Orthodoxy, we emphasize that God's grace is a free gift, not something you earn by doing certain things. And this ties into a concept the document mentions, deification.
Deification. Okay, gotta be honest, that sounds kind of intense. Break it down for me. What are we talking about here?
So deification is this idea that humans, through Christ, we can actually experience being united with God in this life, not just going to heaven later, but like being part of the divine right now. And this changes how the Orthodox Church views a lot of what went down at Fatima.
Okay, starting to connect the dots. So how does this deification idea clash with the Catholic view of Mary? And why is that such a big deal when we're talking about Fatima?
The document says those Fatima apparitions with Mary, presented as this go-between, asking for specific prayers, the first Saturday's devotion, all that it contradicts how Orthodox Christians understand deification.
Hold up. First Saturdays. What's that now?
Oh, yeah. It's part of the Fatima message, encourages folks to receive communion on the first Saturday for 5 months in a row, say the rosary, meditate on Mary's sorrows. It's meant to, like, console Mary, make up for sins.
So the document's saying all this emphasis on Mary stepping in, on us doing certain actions to get grace that doesn't fit with the Orthodox view of God's grace just being there, available to everyone through Christ.
You nailed it. It's not even just the specific actions. It's the whole theological understanding underneath that creates the issue.
It's amazing how this document, it ties all these theological threads together,
Yeah.
It creates this whole critique of Fatima from the Orthodox perspective.
It really does, and this is where things get super interesting. It moves past just individual doctrines and goes to this bigger issue of spiritual discernment, using Fatima as like a case study.
Okay, so not just Fatima's wrong, but here's how to think about stuff like this, but through that Orthodox lens.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing it points out, the Fatima visionaries, they were kids, right? A lot of apparitions, it's children, often around puberty too.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
That's oddly specific, isn't it? Why focus on that?
It's not to say the kids were making stuff up, but to be careful,
Right.
Religious experiences, they're emotional, open to interpretation, especially for kids. The document's saying, test these things against Scripture, church teachings. Don't just assume it's God talking because it feels powerful.
So check if it fits with the faith, not just take it on blind faith, basically.
Right. It even brings up these Orthodox saints, super revered figures. They warned about this. Don't prioritize personal feelings over solid doctrine. Discernment is key. Don't be ruled by emotions alone.
Which, man, that's good advice for life these days. Information overload, everyone's screaming truth. Being able to sort through that, figure out what's actually reliable, that's huge.
Absolutely. In this document, yeah, it's about Fatima and Orthodoxy, but that lesson, thinking critically, being discerning, that's for everyone. Question things, dig a little, don't just accept.
And it ends on such a bold note. It says Fatima's a straight-up attack on Orthodoxy. Wow.
It's a strong statement, for sure. But even if you don't fully buy that, it makes you think, right, what do we base truth on? Feelings, authority, logic, or is there something more? That's what I love about this document. It makes us examine these big questions, figure out our own approach to truth.
Definitely gives you a lot to chew on, even beyond just this one event.
Oh, for sure.